Well, this is going to be an exciting episode of Out of the Main. John, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I feel like we're going to have a flag thrown on us for the next 40 minutes or so. We haven't had a flag in a while, so we have to dedicate one whole episode to getting a flag thrown on us for everything we got wrong.
Yeah, this entire episode is a flag because I listened back to our episode that we did an album focus on the Christopher Cross album.
Yep.
And I remember there were so many questions we had and so many things that we got wrong, including the cringy moments that you and I kept saying Michael Omartian.
Yeah.
Because we had only read his name in the past, right?
Right. Yep.
So somebody corrected us not too long after that. It wasn't our guest today, but our guest today did write to us and say, well, there are a couple things that I could maybe fill in some holes, answer some questions, maybe clarify. And of course, we took him up on the offer, and it just took us forever to kind of get it coordinated. But here we are. And we have all the way from Zurich, Switzerland, none other than the drummer from the Christopher Cross Band and others, Tommy Taylor. Tommy, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, guys. It's great to be here with you. It's really super.
I just got to dive right into one of the flags that got thrown on us. And in case you're wondering, Tommy, that's a recurring motif. When one of us gets a detail wrong that we find out later, the flag comes in, we get penalized 15 yards, and
right.
So, but the biggest eye opener to me was that I always thought, because it was customary of the era, that Christopher Cross was a person around which they assembled a band of session players. And that's only partially true because there are session players on the records that we all know and love. But Christopher Cross was not necessarily just a person. Christopher Cross was a band, correct?
That's correct. Yes. I mean, I joined the band in 1977. I got a call from their manager, who I had been friends with for a number of years, and they were going to make a move to Austin from Houston. They were doing a house gig in Houston at an apartment complex nightclub, and they were going to make a drummer change. And my foray into the thing was to do a free demo session in the studio for a chance to be in the band. So that's kind of how I came on board.
Interesting. So, but for the Christopher Cross album, we do see some familiar session cats. So my confusion was, how do I made no distinction to the fact that Tommy and Andy are in the band and then there's session cats that come in and play with them.
Right. The thing was, I mean, we always assumed that we were working as a band towards a band record deal. And, we never thought it was going to be any different. In fact, there's, an article in the Austin paper, 3 months before we went to record, the first line on it is, Christopher Cross is not a person. Christopher Cross is a 4-piece, rock band. So, that was kind of our thing. When things, came down to the legalities of it, the label signed Chris separately and didn't sign us. So we were essentially still in the band, but not legally signed to the label. So that kind of left a lot of doors open for things to change. And, in mid-session, they decided that he would be known as Christopher Cross. That wasn't even part of the original thing, So, but we were working as a band. We were working on Chris's material. That was the whole reason for us, to be there, is for Chris's songs. Obviously, he's the lead singer and the songwriter of the group. We were supporting ourselves by doing cover music rather than going and working day jobs. We played fraternity parties and casuals and things like that. And I sang a third of the material. Chris sang a third of the material, and Rob and Andy split the other third. So, that's kind of how that went.
Now, one of the other things that I learned about you, Tommy, obviously I got to know you as a drummer. But as I went back and kind of reviewed your history, your Wikipedia page, and some of the materials you sent us, you play multiple instruments, which we'll get to later with the new record you're working on. But drums, guitar, keys, vocals, right? All of that?
Not really a keyboard player.
Not keyboard?
Oh, I wish I did. That's one of the things I really wish I did play, but unfortunately at this point I don't. But hopefully.
Besides the fact that your quote fame, let's say, came from as a drummer, do you feel that is your primary instrument, or is that secondary to something else like the vocals or guitar?
Well, no. I mean, 2 weeks before I got the call to join Christopher Cross, or potentially join Christopher Cross, I was leaving the drum kit to be stand-up singer. I had a band on paper with some people that later went on to become pretty notable. And that was, I didn't have any original material, but I wanted to stand up and sing because I always felt like, I was going to have more mileage out front, in front of a band rather than behind the band. You know, the lead singer drummer thing had not been terribly successful. Don Henley and the guy in the Standells. You know, that's about it. You know,
Triumph, so, maybe.
Well, maybe Phil Collins, but I mean, it wasn't really.
No.
You know, at that point, that wasn't even a thing yet. So
we assume you have good dance moves then.
Well, I don't know. No, I don't know. You know, I'm certainly not a frontman. You know, like Paul Rogers or anything like that. Where I throw the mic stand 42 feet up in the air and look at the guy in the audience and catch it with one hand. You know, I think I've always been a singer. You know, I always wanted to be a singer, and you know, I mean, the talk was you know, back in the day. I mean, Chris said, you know, let's get let's get my record done, and then we'll do one for you, you know. And I always assumed that, well, oh wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, Chris likes my voice, and I always thought, well, man, it would be pretty cool to have Chris writing songs for me, you know, because he could certainly. I mean, Chris is the kind of songwriter, he can write for other people, you know, pretty easily especially in those days. It wouldn't have been a problem for him. But, you know, I mean, things kind of took off in a lot of different directions. We didn't get there, you know.
Quick trivia question of the day. John, do you know Christopher Cross's original last name?
Isn't it Geppert or something to that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting. So I was about years old when I learned that.
Well, you mind if I ask a question about the thing that's been gnawing at me the whole time? So
is it you want to ask me or Tommy?
Well, you're both Tommy. So Taylor, that is.
Yeah.
So obviously where I started playing and the love of music, to me, I'm always drummer focused, and you probably picked that up from the episode that we did. And so there were multiple times throughout our listen through of that debut record where I commented on what you were playing, and I hope I was properly complimentary, but
absolutely.
One of the things that really caught my attention, which I'd like you to explain, is how the part for Sailing came about. And the thing that really caught my ear is on the chorus, the flams that sort of accentuate the syncopation of the melody and all that. And I remember raving about that, and then finding out after the fact when you talked to us that there's a Jeff Porcaro connection to that whole drum part. And it just feeded my own enjoyment because I'm such a huge Jeff Porcaro fan. So can you explain all of the evolution of that?
Yeah, likewise. I mean, Jeffrey was certainly somebody that I listened to. I mean, I wasn't, I've been mistaken for Jeff a lot because obviously it's the usual suspects on the record other than Andy and Rob and I. So everybody just assumed if they didn't read the credits that I'm Jeff Porcaro, which is very flattering, but I get letters every year. People that I've been listening to this record for my whole life. I learned how to play drums by playing along to you. I thought you were Jeff Porcaro. I mean, and I'm going, well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of a problem for me, because obviously he has plenty of notoriety and I don't necessarily have very much. Yep. But Jeff, Sailing was a very difficult tune. I was not a ballad player. I came from a very rock standpoint in my, musical taste, although we did cross into a lot of pop stuff that's kind of where our common ground was with Rob and Chris and Andy and I. But I was a harder player and I wasn't really a ballad guy. And Rob Muir was also a drummer, our keyboard player. And, Sailing was not, Sailing became this thing. For us, it wasn't that. It never was that. I mean, it was just another one of Chris's songs. We never thought Sailing would be popular. We would have bet millions that it wouldn't have been. We liked the song. It was never my favorite song. I mean, I've grown. That's kind of like, the one, like you said about Spinning. It's kind of the one for me that like, well, yeah, I kind of dig it now after the fact because I can look at it with a different set of eyes. But, so, Rob had kind of showed me the part, and I kind of changed the bass drum up a little bit. And, it was a 16th note thing with the cross stick. And then, and that where I've always, those kind of the punches like that, I was basically, Rob just had me do a kind of a left-right thing between the ride cymbal and the toms. And it wasn't very strong. And, and I didn't know what to play. I wasn't a ballad player. I mean, if you want me to play Cold as Ice by Foreigner, I can figure it out. I'm not, I could sing it. I could sing it at the same time. But as far as the ballads, it was a weak part for me. It's actually one of my favorite things to do now and one of my strengths. But, so we were having a trouble getting the song. The main thing about that song is it's got to just be steady, because it's the hypnotic thing of the guitar that's happening. The drums are not really the focus. You know, it's more about the lyric and the dreaminess and the whole thing. So I was just going along playing, but we were having a difficult time keeping it steady and making it the track speak. And it was just one of those weird moments where, you know, I think Omartian probably, you know, thought, well, let's bring Jeff in. So Jeff comes down to play that song and another piece that we recorded later called Marianne. And, you know, I mean, he played my kit. You know, he didn't bring his kit in because we were still a band and everybody thought like a band. So we wanted to keep the sound consistent because I'd worked a long time getting the drum sound. Jeff played a little heavy handed on my tiny little kit. And, you know, and what he was playing, you know, we listened back to it, and even, you know, Omartian and Chris and everybody just went, well, you know, I mean, anything Jeff plays is going to be great, but it's like, that's not it. And it was like, wow, okay, so I didn't get it and Jeff didn't get it. And so, you know, we went on recording other songs, and then we decided we would go back and revisit it. And I basically took, you know, the things that I thought were really cool about what he had played on the track and morphed that into what I was already playing with the track, and used some of the sensibilities like, okay, well, I need to speak more, but not quite as much as he was doing. So that's kind of how that part evolved. I mean, he played those flams, so I played those. That's where they came from. But the rest of it was pretty much what I had been doing in the past. I don't remember the rest of the parts of what he did, actually.
That's amazing.
Wow,
Well,
what a story.
I would say au contraire on the people
Well-
aren't really listening to the drums, though, because you may recall, Tommy, if you listen back, I said, go through this album one more time and just listen to the rhythm section. Because what you and Andy put together, in my own experience, get totally overlooked because the songwriting's so good. Then I just listened just to the two of you groove, and it's like, wow, there is something special. And I don't even know that this sound exists on any other artist.
Yeah,
Well,
I go to
I
the
mean-
kick drum on Ride Like the Wind. I can just listen to the kick drum on that, Ride Like the Wind. It's
Well,
great.
you know, I mean, you know, that's another thing. You know, Rob, that was the first song I ever played with Christopher Cross. I mean, I heard the demos of other songs that we had done, but that was the first thing when I met them and we set up to rehearse for the demo session the next day. That's the first song I ever played, and I was already blown away with the band and the material. I wanted the gig really bad, and when I heard that song, it was just, you know, Chris played a little bit of the riff, you know, and I Rob had explained to me, you know, had the you know, the triplets on the hi-hat thing, and I went like, you know, Chris kind of played the da 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 da. I went, okay, stop, let's just play it, you know, and we jumped right in, as I recall, and it was like, you know, the whole time I'm playing it, listening to him sing and listening to the parts, I'm freaking out. I mean, because it's so much better than anything else they had, and they already had amazing songs, and I just went like, that's it. That's the number one right there. I knew it then, you know. And but there were some things that happened, you know. I've told this story before. There was a local band in Austin that was probably one of the better bands that ever came out of there that did original music back before the Cosmic Country thing. Oh, here we go. I tried to turn those off. I hope it didn't. And they were called Genesee. And they had a song called Whiskey Still, and it had a line in it, got such a long way to go.
Oh.
And the drummer Chuck Rogers was one of the greatest players to ever play in Austin. I mean, he's one of my heroes. And he would, and they, let's see, how's it? How does there's a got a long way to go, and that's where I took that from. I said, well, if Chris is going to go, got such a long way to go.
Yeah,
I stole it right from Chuck because I said, I got to throw this in here. It's got to happen because it's going to make it. And so that's where that came from, you know, and you know, the part was just, it evolved over time. I mean, the demo, Chris has released the demo, you know, on his Complete Works, the first thing I ever recorded with the band. And, you know, I was very minimalistic in those days. And that's kind of probably how I got the gig, because I didn't play enough to get in the way. And I evolved into playing a little bit more and being a little more artistic. But the you know, my bass drum part, that was a very simple groove. I played 1 and 3 on the kick drum, 2 and 4 on the snare, the 16ths on the thing, on the hi-hat. And so Omartian was really intent on having the 4 on the floor bass drum, and we resisted. I mean, there must be 7, 2-inch reels of that song tracked, because it was disco. It's like we had just survived disco. We weren't going back there. We were going to do 4 on the floor. Not going to turn us into a disco band, and he said, he even drew a little thing that said submit with an arrow pointing down, stuck it on the studio wall. So we argued, but, we friendly argued. I mean, he knew what he was getting into because he was working with a band. He wasn't working with studio guys that he could just tell what to play. And he liked the way we sounded and wanted us to be, in that thing. And, I mean, it turned out as a big hybrid. We did a lot of different versions of it. He wanted me to play 4 on the floor through the whole thing, even through the Got Such a Long Way to Go parts. I was going, oh, man, it's got to open up, got such a long way to go, But, it was just what we finally arrived at was definitely magic. And I'm glad he stayed the course with us, and that we were able to evolve it into that fantastic track. Because I mean, it's really fantastic. I mean, an interesting thing is that was the first time I'd ever played along with a metronome. That also he wanted very, very steady. A lot of the tracks on that record are not cut to a click. That one is. And one thing I'd learned about, I was so green. I mean, I was only 22 years old. The only studio work I'd ever done before that was demos with the band. And one of the first things I learned was don't ever stop, because you don't know if you screwed something up or not. So, just keep going. But it was the first time he had the Lindrum set up. It was one of the first Lindrum machines ever. And it was just going, and I'm playing along with it. And so at the end, somewhere is going, he's not listening to that in the control room. He's not listening to the click track. He's just listening to the band play. And at that point, Rob is tracking the grand piano on that. He got replaced with Omartian. But, and I was the only person hearing the drum machine, not the rest of the band. They're playing along to me like they normally would in a recording situation. And so somewhere in the fills on the end, I'm 180 degrees out from the click track, because I rushed a fill, and it's like I just got back to where it's playing backwards to me, and I just gritted my teeth and kept playing. And we go into the control room, and Michael's going, yeah, man, that's happening, man. I'm going, there's a problem. He went, what do you mean? What's the problem? I said, well, like at the end, I'm not with the click track, I'm not with the drum machine. I'm 180 degrees out. He looked at me and said, did anybody hear anything? I went, they said, no. I said, it's done. Oh, wow. They never check it, but I know it's there because I did it. Yeah.
Did you feel, Tommy, like I can't think of the Christopher Cross band without thinking of Michael Omartian as like a band member as well? Like, did he feel like he was part of the band with you guys?
Michael was so great, because obviously to me, okay, I could talk about Michael Omartian for a whole show. To me, and there's others obviously, but there's 3 really significant piano players in the world of pop music to me: Floyd Kramer, Elton John, and Michael Omartian. And then there's the next tier. I mean, Michael is so fantastic, but he's the most unassuming guy in the world. He just sounds like that. I mean, you listen to Dr. Wu, it's like, my God, without him, it wouldn't even be a song. It's just so brilliant what he plays. Yeah. And so, he came on board. Rob Muir was, a good keyboard player. He'd been with us. We did all this stuff as a band. We did all those songs, and all the arrangements that you hear, pretty much we had already laid all that out. Michael just kind of iced the cake. Some of them were advanced a little further than others. But, when we started out, even before he started tracking grand piano with us, most of the time we were playing, he's not in the control. He's in the cutting room with headphones on, moving, dancing, pointing, doing as like a director, but he's the vibe. He's learning us and molding with us, and it was just a fantastic experience. I mean, you're right on, because he really was like another band member. And then he started playing some piano, and Rob, that was a tough thing for him, because all of a sudden he's relegated over to playing Rhodes or synthesizers or whatever. But Omartian was such a brilliant, grand piano players, like, what are you going to do? Here's the guy that played on all your favorite records, and he's willing to track the tracks.
Yeah.
And, he's just got monster time.
Mm.
I mean, he's so locked in, you don't need a click track because just listen to him. He's cutting the wake for you. So, but he became, integral. He became part of the band on those sessions. It built slowly, but by the end he was in it. And then, it's funny, we'll talk about that too, but at the very end, he wasn't.
Well, one of the things about this record, as we're still on it, we talk a lot about yacht rock in general, pretty much the West Coast stuff has that, as we call it in quotes, the pristine recording nature of it. I mean, I put the sound of that record right up there with Steely Dan's Asia. It's different, but I put it on par. And that starts, in my opinion, it always starts with getting the drums sounding good from a recording. And it also includes, obviously, the way the person plays, their, not just their time, but their consistency, but also the tuning, the prepping of the drums that you came in. So I have a couple of quick questions. How many toms were you using? Was it 4?
There's 3 rack toms and 1 4 tom. And,
Okay.
and that kind of, before that, nobody was really doing that. Then after that, you saw that happen. The drums, that drum set was ordered especially from Sonar for that record.
Okay.
We postponed the tracking of that record because the drums were stuck on a boat in Boston Harbor.
Oh my God.
Well, what else? So then you said you spent some time getting them right. What can you recall from the tracking that you can remember, either how you prepped the drums or maybe the way that the room was prepped? Because there's so much clarity to it. There's not a lot of room ringing. It's not that big roomy sound. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I had been mentored by a guy in another band that our manager managed, a guy from Fort Worth, Texas, named Gary Ozier. And, he was an astonishingly great timekeeper, but he was one of the first guys locally that had live sound where the drums were like really out front and loud and mic'd up with a proper sound system. And so, we got to be really close friends. And I was basically just following Gary's lead and doing a lot of things. And so when I went into the studio the night before we started tracking, Carlos Vega's drums were still there from the session that day. They hadn't torn them down yet. He had a Camco kit. He had a 24-inch bass drum, a 10 by 14, a 12 by 15 rack tom, 16 by 18, 18 by 20 floor tom. Okay, that's the sound of the day, LA. Huge drums, big, kind of muffled up a little bit. I had a 14 by 18 kick drum, a 5 by 8, 8 by 10, 5 by 8, 6.5 by 10, 8 by 12, 14 by 14 floor tom.
Wow.
They looked like one of those mini kits, and they were all mic'd under. The toms were all mic'd underneath, not on over the top. And this is something that Chet and I developed that I took from Gary. The drums are tuned extremely below their fundamental, so it's like little bitty drums tuned way low.
Okay.
Wow.
And it's the thing is, nobody. I mean, when people saw those drums, I mean, we're in Warner Brothers Amigo Studios. Randy Newman's recording next door. With Lenny and Russ. And Teddy Templeman's down the hall. I mean, they're all these people. They would come into our session, stand there, listen to the playback, point at the drum kit, shake their heads, and walk out.
Yeah.
Happened every day for 2 weeks. I mean, people couldn't get over what we had done with the sound of these drums. Now, Chet Himes, Chet was pretty special. First of all, he was our engineer. The whole thing leads back to this community, family type of thing. You don't bring your own engineer to your debut recording with Warner Brothers from Texas.
He did the mix too, right?
He did the mix too.
Yeah.
I mean, they thought so much of Chet Himes' sound that they put his name on the label.
Wow.
It doesn't happen very often. It has happened, but not very often. Engineered and mixed by Chet Himes. That's a big deal to have your name on a record.
Yeah. Wow.
He told me.
So,
go ahead. Well, I was going to change the subject just a little bit, but I was thinking back to one of the interesting stories that I'm privy to, courtesy of a text message from you, that I think our listeners would find interesting. And that was the guitar solo that was not recorded in the studio. I don't know if that was Eric Johnson's lead, but there was a guitar solo that was recorded at your house. Tell us that story.
No, it wasn't. It was recorded in Austin at the Con Street Studios, where we had recorded all of our demos. Eric lived in Austin. I've known Eric since I was 13 years old. And Tomas Ramirez, excuse me, Tomas Ramirez, the sax player that plays on Minstrel Gigolo as well. Those were two people that, especially for Chris, but we all wanted to include them on the record because they're brilliant players and awesome players. And we wanted to give them a shot at being part of what we were creating, I think. And so the tracking was pretty much done. I think this was probably in like late August, early September, and they took a break and came to Austin, and we cut those two solos at Pecan Street with Chet. And basically, to my memory, it was Chet and me in the control room and Eric in the studio, and Chris was, like he often would be out, on the phone or doing whatever else. I mean, Chris didn't micromanage situations like that, but it was really important because I loved Eric's playing. I was a huge Eric fan before that was one of the things that Chris and I had in common. We were both big Eric Johnson fans. And so, that was not an easy track for people to play to. Neither Tomas nor Eric had a real easy time with that at first, because it's kind of a slow tempo and, the changes are odd. It's in Chris's modal tuning and stuff. And so, I pretty much coached him through that whole thing until we got something that was really great. And, it's like, hey, Chris, come in and check this out, see what you think. And it was like, yeah, that's happening. And same with Tomas. Tomas was doing the same kinds of things. Like, what am I going to play on this? And finally, with Tomas, I just said, Tomas, man, just make it sound like it's melting,
Mm-hmm.
And then played those things that you hear coming out of Eric's solo. That just melts into that note. And then just like really slow, sexy, melting kind of moody thing.
Yes.
And then he goes on that jazz scat thing that he does. And it was like, when he did that, I was like, oh my God, that's it.
Co-produced and co-arranged by Tommy Taylor.
Yeah.
That's like getting back to the arrangements though. I mean, that was one of the benefits of the band, Chris would bring the sketches of the songs. And then we developed all our own parts immediately. I mean, we were so cohesive at a certain point that it was just the first time, we ever played Never Be the Same. We were playing at a club called Mother Earth. It was a cover bar. Chris didn't really particularly enjoy playing there. The crowd was more of a rock crowd, and we kind of didn't play so much rock, but we would do medleys. The whole thing about a gig like that at a club is to keep the beat going so the dancers stay on the dance floor. So I think we used to do these things, and we'd play like 1985 by Paul McCartney, and then it would stop and the bass drum would keep going. And in the interim, somebody would decide what the next song that we're going to play would be. And Chris just started playing those Todd Rundgren changes, da, 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 and everybody just kind of fell in. And I'm keeping the bass drums going. And then all of a sudden we're like, no, the bass drum's not 4 on the floor. I changed it up to what you hear on the record. And he sang that song from beginning to end the first time while I'm on stage. We've never heard it before, and we played it, and then we took a break.
Oh my gosh.
Woo!
I love those stories.
I'm freaking out. I mean, I'm chasing Chris to the bar because we're out going to get go get some water or something for the break. I'm going, Chris, what was that? Oh my God, that's the greatest song I've ever heard. That's going to be bigger than I Like to Win. That's, it was really amazing to me. And Chris just turned around and said, yeah, it's something I've been working on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But yeah, but that's kind of what the beauty of that band was. We knew what we were doing, and we knew how Chris wrote. And so we knew where to go when he would come up with something like that. And that's just kind of how those arrangements came about. They're very band arrangements. And I think that's why that record sounds different. We had played those songs mostly, for a long time before we recorded them. I know you brought up on the last podcast about Never Be the Same and the modulation. Yeah. That was Andy's idea, actually. Andy was the one who pitched the modulation for the last verse. So there you go.
So you didn't do that first time,
right? And so, but the thing is, when we got to with that song, it didn't have a bridge. It didn't have that solo section, and so I mean, Michael figured out pretty fast, like, we need something there. So he just sat down at the piano and played them, and we went like, wow, that's awesome. I mean, we've got the guy that played all our favorite records right here. And he just like goes with his part in the middle.
Yeah.
And so we cut it, and he said, yeah, it's pretty cool. We were going, God, that's just the greatest thing. He said, yeah, well, they'll never really figure out that it's the outro to Layla.
Oh, jeez.
Oh my God.
Wow.
But it's arrangement. That's not lyric. That's not vocal and melodies. I mean, lyric and melodies.
Right.
But I mean, that's the changes. It's the outro. But I mean, the changes to begin with it wouldn't have made any difference by Todd Rundgren.
Yeah. Well, now everybody uses the same 4 chords anyway, so all that's out the window. So I got to give a one recommendation though. I'm a big vinyl listener still, and I was actually kind of boned up a little bit on that album last night. And for people looking for a new copy, a really good sounding copy, the reissue by Friday Music that came out probably 5, 6, 8 years ago, something like that. But it's 180 gram and it's really well mastered. So if you're looking to get a new copy of this gem, look that one up.
Cool. I noticed, I'm going back to what you guys said before about the mastering. Bobby Hada was a staff mastering guy at Warner Amigo Studios. That's why he did it. That's where he came from, and he was great. He did a lot of Warner product.
What was the track that was cut from that session that we just found later on, John, from the Christopher Cross album? Was there a cut that's out there? Remember, John O'Grady sent it to us. We'll have to cut this out, but
yeah. I don't remember. I remember something, but it's unclear in my head. So,
I mean, a song that's not on the record.
Yeah.
It's probably, is it Mary Ann?
Yes.
Oh, that's probably it.
Okay, Mary Ann was a song that was in the first set of demos that I recorded, and that was the other song that Porcaro tracked that we didn't use, and we later re-recorded it for the Yamaha International Song Festival. In 1980, and so it was released as a single in Japan. So that's
interesting.
It was always it was always one of my favorites. I mean, I don't know that that's the best track of it that we could have ever cut. I mean, it always bothers me because it rushes a little bit, but But
I had a question for you that I'm hoping I'm not picking at a scar here, but I can't help notice when we get to the next record, Another Page, there's a lot more studios musicians, multiple drummers. You've got Steve Gadd, Jeff Porcaro, Andy Salmon still on bass, but you've also got Mike Porcaro, Abe Laboriel, Lukather comes in. So
and it's very convenient because I mean, there was obviously there was a real struggle there, and I think Chris was struggling with the whole thing too, because I mean he had become Christopher Cross, whether he wanted that or not. And he also was very enamored with those studio guys. And, I mean, he wanted them to play. I mean, and we had, we had all kind of personally drifted apart a little bit. He was living in LA. I was living in Austin. So was Rob and Andy. And, I mean, it was just, it's a sordid tale, but I mean, it kind of is what it is. At that point, it's kind of convenient because they didn't really list the track information on the record, if I recall. So you don't really know who played on what. I think that was intentionally done so that it wouldn't take away from us. But I mean, I know what I played and what I didn't play. I played on 2 songs, and Andy and I played on 2 songs. One of them was Think of Laura. Think of Laura was recorded long before that record was ever started.
The ballad again.
Yeah. Which, and I mean, Chris and I have sort of an interesting, we haven't had the best relationship, through the years, but we're friendly. And I mean, he's told me on many occasions that that's his favorite track. Mm-hmm. That's his favorite drum track, that was done, obviously, the story about his girlfriend's best friend, Laura, who was killed and everything. And he was in Austin and he called up and said, I got the song I want to do because I want to give it to Paige, and it's like, okay, well, cool. So we just went down to Pecan Street where we recorded everything that we'd done before we got the record deal and everything. And we cut that one night straight ahead. And it was never supposed to be on the record. It wasn't cut for the record, but he was short of material and it was a good track. you know, so that's kind of how that ended up being on there. And so that's the original format. And that's not, you know, that's, I don't know what they did on the keyboards later, but that's basically Rob and Andy and me and Chris, just like we always were, you know, back to the band sort of thing.
Are you willing to reveal what the other tune is off that record that you played on?
Deal 'em again. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Deal 'em again. Deal 'em again was, you know, that's a story that most people don't know about. You know, obviously that's a co-write with Chris, which would be, except for Arthur's theme, which was not really in his control. That's the first co-write that he ever did on a record. He didn't write the song per se. Just going back a few years, the band that I was talking about that was managed by our manager was called Texas, not the ones that later had the hits, but they were called Texas. They were from Fort Worth, and very dear friends of mine. And they were working to get a record contract as well, and they weren't having a lot of success. They had a lot of great original material, but maybe it just wasn't quite in the pocket of what the record companies were looking for. So they were going to do some sessions too. And Tim, our manager, asked Chris to produce their sessions. And of course, I'm their biggest fan. And I asked Chris, I said, what songs are you going to cut? And he gave me a list of songs, and Deal 'em Again wasn't on there. It was a brand new tune for them. And I said, what about Deal 'em Again? He said, what about it? I've never heard of it. I said, well, you need to hear it, you know? So he requested that they give him a live copy of Deal 'em Again from one of their shows. And he loved the chorus. Which I did too. But he wasn't that enamored with the verse form. So he decided he would rewrite the song, you know, rewrite the verses, the lyrics and stuff, and keep the chorus. And then they went in and recorded it. So it was first originally recorded by Texas for a demo to shop the record companies. And then there came a point where when we were going to do that Yamaha International Song Festival, that was one of the songs that was up for debate as we might present to them, because we needed something. So we cut a demo of that in Austin, and it just ended up being in our live shows. Chris liked the song. We started playing it. And so when we went to do the new record, he was lacking in up-tempo material. You know, to be real honest, I mean, it's just a thing that happens sometimes. And we needed an up-tempo song, and we had been playing it. He said, let's cut Deal 'em Again. So we cut it. And that was really the first song on that session that we cut and got a track on. And shortly thereafter, you know, but within a couple of days, you know, Andy and I weren't tracking on the record anymore.
I really like that one. That was one of my favorites from that record. That's kind of funny.
But you know, the beautiful thing is that it made Mace some money. You know, I mean,
yeah,
guy's a great friend. I mean, you know, Gary is still a friend of mine, the drummer, and I, you know, Frankie Gilkin was the guitarist. He was in a group, a heavy, one of the earliest metal bands called Bang, that had a number of records on Capitol, and you know, they were wonderful guys, wonderful people. And you know, I wouldn't have gotten the Christopher Cross gig if it wasn't for them. I wanted that, you know, I couldn't be in their band because Gary was the drummer. So I told Tim, if you find anybody else that's this serious, get me the gig.
There you go. Yeah. Well, I have a small confession to make. Actually, it's a large confession. I guess this serves as a way of kind of moving along subject matter wise too. I did not have a great amount of familiarity with Eric Johnson's material. In fact, to the point where, you know, you couldn't escape Cliffs of Dover for a while. And that gave me, I thought that all of Eric's records were instrumental lead guitar records, you know, in the form of Satriani and that kind of stuff. It wasn't until actually fairly recently that I realized how much vocal work and stuff he does, and, you know, just really enjoyed the records. But yeah.
Eric, you know, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, Eric, you know, I mean, I've known Eric since I was 13, like I said. And, you know, I mean, he was in a fusion band. He actually replaced Tomas Ramirez, the sax player, as the lead instrument in a fusion band that was kind of a la, you know, early McLaughlin, that kind of thing, called the Electromagnets. And, you know, I used to go see them all the time. The keyboard player is Stephen Barber, who also worked with Chris on our last tour that I did with Christopher Cross. He was the second keyboard player. And he left to go to music school in New York. And Eric started playing with the same bass player and drummer, Bill Maddox and Kyle Brock, and doing more of his vocal type of songs. And I became an even bigger fan. You know, but Eric wasn't he grew into a better singer. He didn't start out as a singer. He was so great on the guitar, but he was kind of trying to front the band, but not as successfully as you might think in the early days. And actually, I wanted to be his Rod Stewart. That was kind of my next move, was to be the lead singer for the Eric Johnson band.
Yeah. Okay.
And there were even gigs where I actually sat in and did like Going Down and stuff like that. But, it never really came to pass. And then I ended up getting the drum slot, which I never thought I would. That wouldn't have been in my wheelhouse at all. Coming from as simple as I played with Christopher Cross to being, as wordy of a drummer, I guess, is.
Well, the fill when you enter on Cliffs of Dover is a great air drummer moment. So I love.
I have to confess, a lot of that material was already kind of arranged before I got there, and I was just covering what somebody else had already done, and that's a perfect instance of that. But yeah, I had to make it my own. The drummer that had done that stuff was a much jazzier player than I am, and so I kind of had to do my own rock version of some of that stuff. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you want to hear earlier, Tommy, you said that you were more of a straight ahead rock drummer. You want to hear some banging? Listen to John. You sent me this Tones, which is the first studio album by Eric Johnson.
Yes,
there's some rocking kit in that. It's 1986, so we're starting to get to a little bit bigger sounds.
Yep.
And man, the grooves on that record are outstanding, and they're a little more hard hitting than the Christopher Cross stuff, right?
Oh, definitely. It's just a different thing. It was a completely different style of music. I had to kind of just reinvent myself. The thing about Eric is he really loved the experience, Jimi Hendrix experience. So Mitch Mitchell looms large in his legend. And we grew up on Hendrix and Cream. And so it was kind of like, well, can you just play a lot like Mitch? I went like, well, I used to when I was 10, so yeah, I just kind of started doing that again. And I would never play it. He never would. I could never play enough fills for him. He said, could you just play a whole lot more fills? And I went like, man, I'm already playing all the time. I said, no, just play more, So I just started playing, and developed a whole other style, that kind of went along with what he did.
I don't know what's more unusual, John, asking a drummer to play more fills or meeting a drummer that says, I've already played enough.
I've never heard that once in my life. This is the first time I've ever heard that.
Real juxtaposition, because like I said, from Gary Ozier, who played with Texas, the guy, he would never play. He could go for 2-3 songs and not play a fill, he played like Al Green, like Al Jackson did on the Al Green records, So from that to kind of a Hendrix thing, it's like there's a big, a big space there where you can kind of reinvent yourself. But I wanted to talk a little bit, if we got time, you guys brought up Minstrel Gigolo as being kind of an odd track on the record. And, that was, that we'd never heard that song before. And that's the second take we ever played it. It was never, we went to dinner one evening. Things were a little rocky there because, we'd been so close, and yet, some of the tracks we were having a hard time getting, Sailing being the major one. I guess there was something in the ethers that inherently we knew it was really important to have that song right, but we didn't have any idea why, because it didn't make any, not going to be a single, guys.
Yeah.
But not being able to cut it, when you're with your friends, it's your chums, you've been in the van together for 3 years, you've weathered all these storms, and it's like, now you're on the spot, and you can't get the track, it's tough. Mm-hmm. And, and we got all these new things happening with the studio and Omartian, and it's LA, and it's a lot, Warner Brothers, a lot of pressure, I'm a 22-year-old kid. I'm pretty naive. And, so we went to dinner, and Omartian's a family guy at that point. He goes home at 6. He's gone home to Stormy and Christopher, so we decided we'd just go back down to the studio. We didn't have anything better to do. We had it blocked out. So, there's somebody there doing maintenance. So we just went there, and Chet's there, and Chris just tuned into that tuning that he uses for Sailing, and he just started playing that riff. And we just jumped in and started playing it. And Chet's about to lose his mind trying to find some tape to throw up there to capture whatever we're doing. And he didn't capture the whole first pass. And he just said, guys, you just got to play that again. So we listened to it and said, okay. So we went out and played it again. And that's the track you hear.
Oh my goodness.
And that's the band, the real band. That's Chris, Andy, Tommy, and Rob. That's it. You know,
okay.
we played that song. We had never heard it before. I mean, I'd never heard it before at all. Maybe Rob had heard some inkling of it because Chris would play him things. But we just played that start to finish and just did that. It's just a jam. And Chris sang it. All the words were just like that. And, you know, Rob had been in the back seat for a long time on the sessions. This is right at the end, pretty much. It may have been before we finally got sailing again, but he had been watching Michael, and he was very enamored with Michael's playing on all of the records that he had done, you know, and he was a quick study, and he went, "Oh, I see. That's how you do it." And he went back in, and that was the new Rob Muir. And
nice.
His track is brilliant. I mean, that's a reborn Rob Muir. It's like an epiphany. And he nails that track. And that's not an overdub. I mean, if I remember correctly, that's right along with the band. And he just plays majestically. And he was never the same since. I mean, after that, he played completely differently.
Wow. Well, we should talk about what you're doing now, because the magic is still happening. The Michael Omartian collaboration is still happening, and you've got a new set of tunes, 9 tunes for a record that is coming out soon. Tell us about this project and when we can expect to hear it.
Well, I'm hoping, probably pretty soon, maybe I'm hoping to drop some singles here within the next couple of months. It's always strange doing an independent release, because you want people to actually hear it. And it's kind of difficult, but I was really blessed. I mean, I had laid a few tunes down. I wasn't a songwriter. And then all of a sudden I found myself writing some things, and people said, "Hey, that's really good." I went, "It is?" And I'm okay. Yeah, all right. And so, I had finished this one song. Rob had recorded one with me, and I needed piano on this new song I was working on. And I went in, I was going to go in and cut a little, I'm building it from the ground up. I'm doing it starting with a click, acoustic guitar, sing the vocal, add the drums, add the bass, that kind of thing. That's the only way I can afford to do it. I can't hire a band to go in and play it all live. So, Rob was scheduled to come play on it in Austin from California. And sadly, between the time we talked and the time he was going to record it, he was killed, and he was walking home from from a convenience store in Studio City, and a drunk driver ran over him.
Wow.
And it was pretty heavy because, I mean, Rob and I were pretty close, even though we hadn't spent a lot of time together in a number of years, but it was a pretty big blow. And of course, it was a huge blow to Chris because they were very close and we're still working together. And, I had keyboard players that could play the track in Austin. And it was just like, every time I would think of a name, I mean, really great players, and I would just go, something's not right about this. It's like, and I just went, I need Michael Omartian. That's the sound I need. But I didn't have any way to get in touch with Michael. I didn't know him very well, and I hadn't spoken with him in 20 years or so. And everybody had lost contact with him. I mean, I knew he'd moved to Nashville, but Chet didn't have any contact for him, and I didn't, and Andy certainly didn't. And in a weak moment, I just emailed Chris and said, "Hey man, I got a song. We've lost Rob. He was supposed to play on it. Would you call Michael Omartian and ask him to play on my song?" I mean, that's pretty bold, I mean, Michael has sold 350 million records. He was the original keyboard player for Loggins and Messina. He arranged and played, accordion on Piano Man by Billy Joel. I mean, his discography, if anybody cares to look it up, it's one of the most outstanding in the world. I'm a little guy that played on a record he did, 40 years ago. Before I could hear back from Chris, I had an email from Michael going, "Hey, what's up? You want me to play let me hear your song. I'd like to hear it." So he said, "Give me a call." So I called him up and I sent him the song, and he said, "That's you. That's great, man. You're singing great. Wow. You played the drums solid as ever. Fantastic. I love it. Yeah, I'd love to play them. Would you mind if I played some organ?" It's like,
would I mind?
well, right. I mean, I'm looking at this going like, well, first of all, nobody's going to ask if they can do something more than you ask them to do unless they think it's good enough to play on, I mean, right. So, I mean, that's big. This guy's done such major stuff. I mean, for him to even listen to my song is pretty amazing. So he did that. He played on it. What he sent me back, I mean, was just so ridiculous. I couldn't even believe it. I freaked out. I mean, that's a whole story in itself. But so I had another song finished, and I had somebody else play it, and the track was good, but it didn't kind of live up to that, and they're quite capable. And I just thought, well, what if I got Michael to play again? I wonder if he could play another song. So I messaged him saying, hey, would you play another song for me? He said, send me whatever you like. I'll play whatever you like. I like your stuff. Let me hear it. I like to hear it. So he ended up playing on all 9 songs.
What's the style of the record? Can you explain that for people?
I think it's kind of singer-songwriter. I mean, I don't know. God, it's hard. It's strangely, there's not much guitar on the record. I mean, there's acoustic on everything because I played it, but it's based a lot around the piano, and organ. It's singer-songwriter kind of stuff. I mean, they're deep album cuts. I mean, there's not a lot of singles, but it's kind of I'm a storyteller. Mm-hmm. So it's lyrically like that. I mean, there's some Christopher Cross sounding stuff in there because, I mean, I love Chris's writing. So, I mean, he's kind of he's part of my deck of cards there,
Sure.
Elton Johnny, Van Morrison, Don Henley, it's got a lot of those kinds of sensibilities in it. Maybe, I don't know. It's how do I describe it? How do you describe yourself? It's always different.
Who does the audio work for you? Are you doing the mixing, or you have someone doing that for you?
But I have a co-producer, Mark Hallman. He produced Carole King, most notably, that's good enough. He's worked with a lot of artists, Ian Matthews, a lot of people from the Austin area, Ani DeFranco, he worked a lot with too. She's pretty contemporary, pretty big, but you can look him up too. I mean, he's done a lot of work. He's a great producer and somebody that I always really thought, well, this guy would be great to work with, because I'm doing a lot of the production myself, but I need that shoulder to lean on. And he's also a great engineer and a great vocalist, and he can play a lot of multi-instrumental stuff. I've got Roscoe Beck played most of the bass on that. He was Leonard Cohen's musical director, and he worked with Eric and me as well, and Robin Ford. And Mark Andes from Heart and Firefall played bass on a couple of tracks, and it's not a lot of luminaries, but there's really solid people on the.
Yeah,
on the
that's
record.
a pretty impressive lineup. We talked to Mark in Jock way back when. Great guy.
Mark, what a wonderful guy he is, and he ended up being on these couple of tunes because they were kind of involved in a couple of different bands that we were in, and I lifted them out of those projects that never came to fruition. I have a great chromatic harmonica player that plays on that first song I was telling you about, named Will Gallison, out of Manhattan, and he's probably one of the best in the world ever. He played with Sting, he played with Donald Fagen. I mean, he's a pretty major guy. And, it was just a miracle that I got it. He liked the song. He said, yeah, I'd love to play on it. He played this amazing outro on one of the songs. I don't know, it's pretty humbling.
It's amazing what can happen when you take a flyer and send an email and say, hey, what's the worst they can say is no. So,
well, I mean, that's really what happened to me so much. I just kind of said, well, look, man, I got nothing to lose here, but really, truly, Michael's input has been the most. I mean, he played organ, he played grand piano, he played accordion, he did full orchestrations on 4 or 5 songs. I mean, it's pretty lush. It's
cannot wait to hear that. It's we'll look for that starting this summer, trickling out in single format. But the album's going to be called "What to Say of the Gold."
Yep.
Look forward to that, and that's going to be awesome. I mean, you see how you describe it. I can kind of hear it when you start mentioning the personnel and your style. So it's going to be really cool. I can't wait for that.
Well, thank you. I think it's we had what happened to Christopher Cross. We came out with that record, and that was kind of the most commercial side of what we were about, and then that kind of took off. So Chris kind of started leaning more in that kind of commercial vein, obviously, because that's where his bread and butter is. There were some pretty deep cuts that never saw the light of day. I mean, I'm not that it's that deep, but I love what we were about as a band, and I mean, this is kind of a good segue into that, into where I would have gone maybe had we stayed, in that vein, So
that'll be very interesting to see. Okay, what's that?
It's not very yachty at all.
It's okay.
That's okay. We'll have you back on to talk about it.
Sometimes we're not very yachty, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been awesome. Good luck with the new project. Hopefully, this new resurgence of yacht rock is finding its way to you and sort of reigniting the flame. But before we let you go, go ahead.
Yeah.
The last thing I was going to ask before you go is you're 4 chapters into writing a book as well, right? So is that coming out in 2022?
Boy, that's a hard book because I'm writing the story of my involvement with Christopher Cross. And it's a pretty deep subject and it's pretty involved. I have I've got a near photographic memory for places and events. So I've got a lot of material and then you have to sit down and kind of write it in a way where people will enjoy it. So I'm hoping to get that. I don't think it'll be out this year, but hopefully I can sit down. I actually sat down and worked on another chapter, basically another page portion of the story the other night. A person who was involved with me managerially wise for a while suggested that I not try to do it in chronological order, but maybe take a chapter at the end and do that and then go back to the beginning and stuff. It might find it easy. So that's kind of what I'm doing,
Cool. Good. Well, thank you so much for coming on, for filling in the blanks, correcting some of our mistakes, throwing a few of the flags.
Yep.
It was great, Tommy. We can't wait to hear the new record. I'd love to read the book, and these are all just excuses to get you back on the show in the future.
Well, great. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff with it. I mean, like I said, I warned you before we went on that I'm pretty wordy, but there's a lot of the stuff, the Christopher Cross stuff that that we still didn't touch on. Glad to talk more. If we want to do another one, it's fun.
Good. Very good. Okay. Well, good. John, you got anything else, or should we let Tommy get back to life in Zurich?
No, I'm going to make some notes, and we'll maybe reconvene again down the road with Tommy. I'd like to do that.
Great. Love it, guys. Thank you so much for having me on.